gorgeous. Welcome to the 5th season of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kayla Smith, a holistic and integrative doctor specializing in fertility and hormone health. If you're looking for insights into hormones, fertility, and all things related, you've come to the right place. Tune in weekly as we record amazing experts in the field of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're going to finally put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get and stay pregnant if that's your goal, as well as eliminate all your hormone-related symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season, we're focusing closely on fertility and hormone health with an amazing lineup of expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, bringing you stories and advice that will support you in your journey. We're here to lift your spirits, give you a virtual hug, inspiration, empower you, and we want you to take charge of your fertility and your health. Thank you all so much for tuning in and being amazing listeners. So now, let's get started on your road to transformation. Let's start putting those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together one step at a time. On today's show, we have Leslie Schrock. She is an author, an angel investor, and working at the convergence of health and technology. Her breakout hit, Bumpin, The Modern Guide to Pregnancy, mixes the latest clinical research with practical advice for working families. Her second book, Fertility Rules, takes the same approach to male and female fertility. Leslie is an investor in Caribou, Roon, Perchwell, Legacy, Kinfield, and DBT Labs, and an advisor to Maven, Alife, Origin, and Reverance. She is also on Gameto's bioethical board and the board of advisors at the Moody School of Communication at her alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. She was named one of the Fast Company's most creative people in business, and her work has been featured on CNBC, NPR, Time, GQ, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Wired, The Economist, and the New York Times. Connect with Leslie at leslieschrock.com on Instagram. And today we're going to talk to Leslie all about her books, and we're going to debunk some fertility myths. So now let's welcome Leslie to the podcast. Hey, Leslie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you and learn about your amazing books and hear about all your knowledge. So let's dive into that. Tell me a little more about you, kind of why you're so passionate about your work and what inspired you to write these amazing books.
So I've spent over a decade of my life working in health, primarily on the tech side of things, working with small companies at the beginning of their journeys to, really rolling out better solutions for patients, mostly in reproductive health, as it turns out. And so when I decided that I was ready to start a family, of course, like so many people, I thought, well, I work in health. This will be easy. I was 34 at the time. And very quickly, I found out that it was not going to be a straightforward path for me. I had a miscarriage around 5-6 weeks, ended quickly, resolved on its own, but it was very jarring. Like, wait a second, I had it and then I lost it. And then the second pregnancy was really the one for me that crystallized why I have to do the work that I do today. I had a chromosomally abnormal pregnancy. It was a fatal condition. It was about to end on its own. But it required a medically necessary abortion to resolve, unfortunately. And I didn't even know such a thing existed because I think so often we talk about abortion in this context of choice. And for me, it was not a choice. It was just healthcare. And so that experience really shook me. I had no one to talk to. I felt like no one was really talking about this. I went to see a grief counselor and I took care of myself. I took care of my mental health. It was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. And also, I still felt so frustrated at the end of it that I really never was able to get rid of this feeling of I have to do something about this because this is not okay. That someone who has as many resources as I do, professional connections, all of these things, I work in health, and also it was such a mystery for me. And so I finally, pregnancy number 3, I was pregnant with my now almost 5-year-old son. I was chatting with a friend and said, I think we've really done women and working families a great disservice here. We're not talking about all of the nuances of pregnancy. Some people love being pregnant. Some people really hate it. Some people have a very hard time. Hyperemesis, for example, when you're throwing up pretty much the entire pregnancy, it can be very, very hard. Mental health struggles, all of these things. And so I said, maybe I should write a book about this, relate my experience, some of my stories, because I did not have a straightforward journey from the miscarriages to childbirth to breastfeeding. And I fortunately now have 2 very healthy kids. But in the end, I had 3 miscarriages. I had another one between my kids. And so really, my writing has little call outs of my experience, but I wanted to marry best in breed research, clinical guidelines with practical advice, because that was another area that I felt was really lacking. We all rely, everyone who's a parent knows, you talk to your mom friends about all of the things that are going on in your life, but I felt like there should be a book out there that reflected a little bit of that too. And so Bumpin is my first book. It covers pregnancy, really from preconception all the way through the postpartum period. It's going to go into its 2nd edition actually next January. I'm just putting the finishing touches. It's now in production. It's very exciting. And my second book, Fertility Rules, which is meant to serve as a prequel to that book, because I think there's so much that we don't talk about when it comes to preparing your body for pregnancy. And I know some of your work is very, very focused on this. So I'm eager to chat with you about it. But I think there are so many problems, one of which is that we just do not include men in these conversations and help them understand what they need to do to prepare to conceive as well.
I love that. And I hate that you got here with all of everything that happened, but I love that you did get here and you were able to write these books, and you're going to help so many women through this, because there's so many nuances to getting pregnant and staying pregnant and then navigating that whole thing. And we don't have any manuals for that. So I'm so glad you wrote these books. And we're going to talk today about debunking some of these myths around pregnancy and getting pregnant even. And so I would love to dive into that. Talk to me a little bit more about some of these myths that we're going to debunk today and some of the things that you talk about in your book.
Well, I'll tell you about the moment I realized I had to write Fertility Rules. I was talking to a friend who was just about to start, trying to conceive. And she says, I'm tracking my ovulation, and, we're going to have sex like right when I hit that peak. And, I think that'll be a great way to do it. And I said, whoa. Do you know how ovulation works? Like, do you understand like this process and how to actually optimize your odds? And I'd written about it a little bit in Bumpin, but I recognized that for the majority of women, people just don't know how it works. And that if you want to get pregnant, actually the ideal way to do it is to have sex in the days before you ovulate, because sperm can live in the reproductive tract for up to 5 days. That's 5 days. And that is also how a lot of unintended pregnancies happen. So always use protection if you think you're anywhere around your fertile window and you're not already on some form of birth control. Use a backup. But I remember this moment so clearly. I had been hearing it from readers, but here I am sitting with a friend who has like 3 degrees. She also works in healthcare. And I was like, oh my God, if she doesn't know, maybe I should just really spell this out. And so I think, ovulation was the very first myth I felt I had to debunk, because so many people in my life, especially like the average age of first-time parents is climbing and climbing. And as that number climbs, it's harder to get pregnant, and it's just a biological reality. And so I really started with ovulation, but I think there are associated myths that, a lot of people still believe. Like low AMH means I'm never going to conceive naturally. And it turns out low AMH in isolation, and I'm sure you've got a lot to say on this topic, low AMH in isolation is not a good single indicator of your natural fertility. I mean, do you find that this is coming up in your work a lot?
Oh, 100%. People think that you can't change your AMH, which you can. I tell people all the time, this is cellular health and you can change it. Yes, we're born with the number of eggs we're ever going to have, but many of those are laying dormant and we can optimize them through cellular health. And then we can change our AMH number. And just what you said, this is not in isolation. Just that alone is not going to determine if you're able to get pregnant or not. So I completely agree. I have this conversation daily with my patients. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think people don't understand. It's an indicator of your ovarian reserves. It can tell you how you'll do in an egg freezing cycle, IVF, things like that, but it doesn't tell you anything about egg quality. I think that's my probably second favorite myth to debunk, which is that when you do egg freezing, when you do a round of IVF, you get a collection of eggs. All you have, the only information you have at the end of that is a number. You cannot know the quality of a single egg because it's a single cell and testing it would destroy it. We do not currently have the technology that allows you to look into an egg and tell you whether or not it's chromosomally normal or abnormal. The only way you learn that information is by creating embryos and then genetically test them. And then there are issues there too. Some of that testing it's not a guarantee. It's a very new technology. We still have a lot of research to do. But it's a fascinating thing. I think that, eggs, that was the hardest chapter of my book to write. I ended up rewriting it a couple times, which, I usually go in and I kind of know what I'm going to write about. And I deviate a bit based on, at this point, I've interviewed hundreds of people for both of my books, providers, parents, but a lot of reproductive endocrinologists, and researchers as well. But I think there's just a lot of misinformation about eggs. The quality question is something, there are all these supplements on the market that say that they can change your egg quality and improve it and all of these things. But in the end, the single biggest, indicator of whether things are going to be chromosomally normal or not is age. And there is nothing you can do about your body's ability to successfully perform meiosis up to a point. It's just a process that becomes less efficient as you age. So it's a difficult conversation to have. I have that conversation as someone who, in the end, our fertility issues were because of my eggs. Like I had my husband tested even after our family was very complete, just because I was curious. And really, I had no other health conditions. No one could give me any answers. But, I think that it is a really difficult conversation to have with people because age is something you can't really do anything about. So that's just another, I think, meiotic errors in eggs are the main reason that, these chromosomal abnormalities happen. But it's hard. It's a really hard thing to, reconcile.
Yes, for sure. And speaking on age, do you think too, there's the other side of that where I feel some practitioners, and this happened to me, where I was told at 36, my age was my only factor and that I would need IVF to get pregnant. And I had 2 successful pregnancies and the last one was at 40. So do you think age is kind of thrown around where it's kind of like, okay, we fall off a cliff at 35 and we can't get pregnant? And again, I don't think age is the only factor. So speak to me on that. How do you feel there?
Yeah, it's absolutely not the only factor. There are genetics, there are epigenetics, there are so many inputs. There's lifestyle, there's the health of your partner, which is a very under-discussed topic. A woman's age in isolation will give you some sense of how difficult it may or may not be. But also, when did your mother go into menopause? There are all kinds of things that can dictate whether or not you're going to have an easy time or a hard time, whether or not you have a pre-existing condition, type 2 diabetes, PCOS, endometriosis. There can be physical blockages. So it really is, I think, for most women, there's a reason the timeline exists the way that it does for people to seek help. So if you're under the age of 35, practitioners will see you, a reproductive endocrinologist will see you after you've been trying to conceive for a year. And the reason is over 90% of people end up getting pregnant if they wait that long. If you're over 35, the timeline is 6 months. And it's for the same reason, because most of the time, if you're going to get pregnant, you will, on your own, without any assistance, you will get pregnant on that timeline. And, the reality is not everybody goes straight to IVF. In fact, rarely you should go straight to IVF. There are specific times and specific cases where that's clearly the right decision. But if you're going to a fertility clinic and someone just tries to hop you straight in there, you should go get a second opinion. You should always get multiple opinions from fertility clinics anyway, if it's possible, based on where you live. And also the wait times, which can be very, very long. But, it should never just be, well, just go do IVF. There are many less invasive treatments. There are medications you can try. Your partner should always be tested before you do anything else at the very beginning of an infertility journey. And there are some pretty cool things you can do at home now too. If it's indicated and you're a good candidate for intracervical or intravaginal insemination, those can be great things to try as you're waiting for an appointment if things aren't working. Or frankly, my favorite use case that people don't like to talk about, but is just a universal truth for anyone who's encountered infertility, is sometimes timed sex gets really old. Sometimes you're really tired of timing sex around your ovulation and your fertile window. And sometimes it's it's amazing. There's a company called Mosey Baby that actually had some great stories about this, where people will write in and say, oh, we tried to conceive for 8 months. I just couldn't take it anymore with all this timed sex. And so I told my husband, go have a private moment and watch your favorite visual stimulation, and then bring it to me and I'll shoot it in there and then we can Netflix and chill. So I think that we've also got to acknowledge it's not always a straightforward journey. Sometimes medically there's nothing wrong. Sometimes it's just a timing thing, a willingness thing. Sometimes somebody's traveling, So I think that it is a complicated topic, and clearly age is not the only thing. What is clear though is the number of chromosomally abnormal eggs grows starting at 37, and it really starts to grow as a percentage by 39. And after that time, the number of normal eggs is much lower than it was when you were 24. Which is why freezing generally should happen in your 20s if it's at all possible.
For sure. So talk to me about some other myths that we can learn from reading your book. Let's debunk some more. So we talked about ovulation and the myths. What are some more?
I think, being able to fix chromosomally abnormal eggs is definitely something that I see a lot of, things on TikTok, things on Instagram. If an egg is chromosomally abnormal, you cannot fix it. It's done, but luckily you'll ovulate again next month and you have another chance. I think that another thing though, that people don't understand is because women are born with all the eggs they will ever have, people don't think about the fact that men regenerate their sperm constantly. So lifestyle changes can actually go a very, very long way. Men who commit 3 months minimum, that's about the amount of time that it takes for, a full generation of sperm to replace and for the body to make it, that is actually very meaningful. You can really improve your semen parameters with lifestyle changes in a way that women just simply can't, because it's a different process. Men regenerate it all the time. And some of the things that I think men don't know, and listen, I think the fertility industry has been stilted towards women for a long time. That is not okay. It should be more equally weighted across men and women, but men don't really interact with the healthcare system too much, and no one is really telling them they need to do what they need to do to improve their sperm. So I don't really even blame them, because it's not like they're learning as kids anything about their sperm supply. They're learning about ejaculation and how to not get pregnant, but they're not learning this is how you maintain and produce healthy sperm. So, for example, men don't know that THC really negatively impacts sperm parameters, multiple sperm parameters, quality, all of that. There are prescription medications that can also have a transient impact on sperm. And again, I say transient because if you stop taking them in about 3 months, the adverse effects will reverse. So actually one is Propecia. Men don't know that when you take Propecia, some of these hair loss medications, it affects sperm. It's transient. It goes away if you stop taking it. Steroids, same thing. Doesn't do what you think it's going to do. It isn't going to give you mighty swimmers. In fact, if you've been taking testosterone for a long time, and not talking about it, odds are when you go to a clinic, you may have no sperm because it shrinks the testicles. And so one of my all-time favorite interviews actually with a doctor was, guy based in Manhattan. And I said, tell me something this is always my favorite interview question at the very end. I said, tell me something I haven't heard before. And he goes, well, you might have heard it because it's actually not as uncommon as you might think. But I had a guy, and his wife come into my clinic, and I took one look at the guy and knew exactly why they were not getting pregnant. And I said, well, what did he look like? What was going on there? And he was like, the guy was clearly taking steroids. And what you realize when you start talking to these men is oftentimes their partners do not know that they have been taking steroids their entire lives. And so they won't even admit it in an appointment. There are weaning procedures. There are ways you can just taper, but it can take up to a year to restore testicular function for some of the men that have been taking steroids. So, yes, it is a hard thing to deal with. And some men continue to lie about it. I mean, that's the other really insane thing that happens. But I think we really have to create awareness around, how does lifestyle, medications, diet, sugar, all of these things really start to impact male fertility and female fertility. I tell people if you're drinking soda, that is just the easiest thing to stop doing. Like, never drink it. That stuff is awful. Right. I think soda should be in the same category as cigarettes, frankly. Right. That much sugar is not good for anybody. And I am not a particularly restrictive. My mindset with nutrition, frankly, is more of an 80-20 rule, right? I think 80% of the time you eat whole, unprocessed foods, you do your best, you eat reasonable portions. Moderation is the name of the game, because restrictive diets don't work over the long term because they are too restrictive. And so, the other 20% of the time, eat what you want in moderation, but just don't eat too much of it. I think this simple rule works really, really well for some people. It does not work really well for everybody, but I think it's a good general guideline. Mediterranean diet is a good framework if you want to just have some general rules to follow, but gives you a lot of choice. But again, no one's telling men that too much sugar is affecting your sperm. No one is telling men that too much processed foods and trans fat is affecting your sperm in a negative way.
For sure. And anything that you can clean your engine with, I'm not going to drink.
A
soda will literally clean your engine. So
the Coca-Cola cleaning corrosion, that was the day that I stopped ever touching that stuff.
Same. Yeah. I think it was like 9th grade since I've had a soda. It's been a long time.
Yeah. I have not had a soda in over a decade, probably. I also find it very gross now, but alcohol, smoking's a non-starter for both, men and women. Exposure to secondhand smoke, is also no good. And then, if it's possible, if you live in an area where there are wildfires and you're exposed to smoke, if you're trying to conceive, make sure you're taking some precautions there. Some doctors even suggest if you're really experiencing infertility in a way that they know is associated with that, they suggest you go somewhere else for a little while and see if you can take a little break.
For sure. Cell phone in the pocket is another one that a lot of guys don't realize is so detrimental to the sperm.
Or laptop on the couch, on the lap. Yeah, the heat. Well, because, same thing with biking, actually. So interesting. Men don't realize that when you're sitting in that bike seat, your testicles are compressed, and that is affecting sperm production. Another thing, one of the interesting debates in the fertility industry right now is around this notion that sperm counts have been dropping for the past 50 years, which we know to be true, but we don't actually know why. There was a book written by a woman named Shanna Swan who led this, game-changing study on, sperm trends around the world. The first version of this study was just based on Western countries' data, from the West. But last year, it was actually updated, or actually late 2022, it was updated to show that globally, something weird is happening to sperm counts. And the whole thesis is that perhaps it's exposure to chemicals and endocrine disrupting products. And so it's also really important for anyone out there that is thinking about trying to conceive, man or woman, make sure your exposure to BPAs, phthalates, plastics. Plastics are the worst. Never, ever microwave your food in plastic. Don't even store it in plastic. I'm like a glass girl now, 100%. The more I've read about this, the more I sound like one of those people who wears a tinfoil hat. But it truly, you read the data and you think, how could I not? Especially I have 2 little boys. I'm like, there's no way you're eating anything that has been microwaved in plastic ever, because it passes in there. Plastics have been found in the placenta. They've been found in breast milk, blood streams, major streams of water. It's just not a good situation. And so again, no one is going to have full control over every single thing. You can't exclude everything. But I think having this kind of viewpoint around, look, do your best, 80-20, moderation is key. Don't beat yourself up. And it's so hard as a parent later not to do that. But, you've got to just do your best and recognize it's all you can do.
For sure. It's so funny you say that too, because my husband always says he's going to get me a shirt that says, I promise I'm fun, because everything I'm like, oh, that's bad. Don't do that.
Yeah. I have to pick my battles now, because, everyone I know, I call myself fertility and pregnancy Siri now, because that's, a big part of I'm sure it's the same for you, where your friends are constantly like, hey, can I eat this thing, or should I eat just salmon and berries and all this other stuff? And I'm like, oh my God, no, like you're eating salmon and berries, but you're also eating like donuts. Like, don't do that.
Right.
Like you're drinking soda and like fruit juice all the time. Like all of that sugar is actually, doesn't matter what other good stuff you're doing if you're doing that much of that. So I'm so with you on that.
That's so funny. Well, we're going to go to break here in a second and hear a word from our sponsors, but any other myths you want to talk about before we do that, or any other points you want to make?
I think if everyone just remembered those things, it's not about perfection. 80-20 is a good rule with everything, with exercise, with nutrition, exposures, all of that. Understand your ovulation, but actually understand how it works, because that is often what is preventing people from getting pregnant. And then I think, male fertility is just a huge unlock for a whole lot of people out there. And it's something that couples really should work on together.
For sure. 100%. I love it. Awesome. Well, we're going to take a short break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to come back and talk more practical tips around optimizing our fertility so that we can get pregnant. So we'll be right back.
Hey y'all, it's Dr. Kayla here. I hope you are loving this episode as much as I am. We will be back shortly, but first, let's hear a word from our amazing sponsor. Trust me, it's something you'll definitely want to hear, especially if you're passionate about fertility and hormone health. Did you know we have our exclusive herbal tea crafted especially for fertility, hormones, and reproductive health? This isn't just any tea. It's a nurturing blend of 5 potent herbs, each chosen for their unique ability to support fertility and hormone balance. Imagine the benefits of red raspberry, nettles, calming chamomile, antioxidant-rich green tea, white peony, and the delightful rooibos vanilla, all in one soothing cup. This delicious, nutritious tea is perfect for starting your morning or relaxing in the evening. So why wait? Head on over to our website, www.hormonepuzzlesociety.com/fertility-tea to support your fertility journey in the most natural and enjoyable way. Now let's get back to our insightful episode and continue our hormone puzzle journey together.
Hey, Leslie, welcome back.
Good to be here. I love this. I love all of these topics. I'm so fired up to talk to you about all of this.
Me too. And I know we talked a lot in the first half about practical tips, but just reiterate really quickly, if you would, maybe your top 5 things that we can do to optimize our fertility starting today.
The first thing is get your partner involved from the very beginning, and the 2 of you should take, ideally, no less than 3 months, more if you've got the time, to really get your bodies in shape. And what I mean by that is work on your nutrition, 80-20 approach, like we talked about, moderation. It's not It's not meant to be super restrictive. It's not good over the long term because as you learn when you're pregnant, all kinds of things go haywire, your tastes, your sense of smell, what you want to eat, what you can physically eat without throwing up in some cases. So, but I think, just committing to doing a preconception appointment, working with your partner, all of that. The second is during that time, start tracking your ovulation. There are many ways to do it. One is just peeing on the sticks you buy from, the pharmacy or Amazon or whatever, and, getting a sense of when that ovulation spike is. You can do basal body temperature, which just requires a little $10 thermometer, and a rectal temperature taken once a day in the morning before you get up. Cervical mucus monitoring is another one that's really great. And all of this is spelled out in Fertility Rules, really, if you want to go deeper on any of these topics. It's both of my books are written in very approachable language. I interviewed many, many doctors and providers across all of medicine, but I really tried to make it, a fun read, something that's easy to follow, practical, simple, all of that. So meant to feel more like talking to a friend than, getting a lot of jargon from WebMD or wherever it is. You are currently Googling information, which stop doing that. There's so much bad stuff out there. TikTok too. What?
You guys said right. Oh my goodness. So many people are like, I saw this on TikTok. I'm like, do not do that.
Yeah. Also, like, birth control does not make you infertile. Let's just get rid of that myth right now. But, I think really have a long-term view of all of these things and, commit to a moderate lifestyle as much as you can. I think we all want to be told you should just eat salmon and just eat berries and just eat these things. But the truth is those foods don't fit a lot of dietary preferences, cultural preferences, and backgrounds. It's not the way everybody on the planet eats. So really, processed foods are really just a good thing to avoid as well. And then just be gentle with yourself. I think that's another thing. Anyone who's experienced infertility, I count myself in this group. It's really hard on so many levels, but perhaps the hardest thing is feeling broken and not knowing where to put that and blaming yourself and not recognizing that this is not a process that everyone can control. It's not something there's only so much you can do. If you have a blockage in your fallopian tubes, there is no amount of salmon that is going to remove it. So, seek care when you feel like you need to, seek information, make sure it's good information, but, take care of your mental health too. I think there's a whole chapter in Fertility Rules about, how to manage that from the very beginning. Fertility Rules is kind of broken up into 3 different parts. The first is, the basics of kind of eggs and sperm and the menstrual cycle, all of these things that, no one ever really teaches you. And then there's a section about optimization that goes into, exposures and nutrition and activity and all of that. And then what to do if you need some help. How does assisted reproduction work? Where do you start? What are the questions to ask if you're interviewing a clinic? All of that. So, some people just read the first 2 sections and they don't ever need the third. And some people read the whole thing and then message me on Instagram asking, can you write a whole book about just how to go through IVF? So but it's a unique experience. It's an individual experience. And I wish we would all stop comparing ourselves to each other because it doesn't matter how bad your situation was, the perception of bad compared to someone else. It's your experience. So I don't think comparing or blaming is helpful, particularly.
No, definitely not. And your book sounds like such a great resource. I love that we talked about that and kind of debunked some of these myths. One thing we didn't touch on is supplements. And I know there's a lot of chatter on the internet about supplements and many things are not true. So let's talk about that for a minute. What are some myths around supplements that you want to talk about?
I think the biggest one is just that supplements are going to save you. And supplements are these magical substances that can wipe away age and all of these other things, and they can't. There is no supplement you can take that just universally fixes eggs, right? Like we talked about that earlier. Eggs that are chromosomally abnormal cannot be fixed. We do not have the technology to do it. It just is not a thing yet. So maybe someday. But I think that, supplements are overused. There are some pretty famous books in the fertility industry that advocate for a large number of supplements. People who have, conditions, trying different things. When you're under a provider's guidance and you find out you have a deficiency, supplements can be incredibly powerful. But that is what I think a lot of people forget. Supplements are not candy. They may come as a gummy form factor. They may look like candy. They may taste like candy when they are gummies. However, they are serious substances. They have, pharmaceutical level effects in some cases. And taking too much of something can cause adverse effects. Also, choosing a supplement, when you're later pregnant that doesn't have enough of something is also not good. And we can dig into that once we get into pregnancy. But I think that, it's interesting. The supplement industry in the U.S. is just not well regulated. It's regulated. Supplements are regulated like food. They're not regulated like, prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, they are every bit as powerful as prescription drugs. So if you're chucking an entire handful of supplements into your mouth every day, you should really take a step back. Go see a provider who can help tailor your regimen to your unique needs. And frankly, stop paying to have really expensive urine, because in a lot of cases, you're just going to pee it out anyway. There's only so much your body can absorb. Sometimes those levels get toxic and you can cause liver damage and all kinds of other stuff. But, I think that for men can take a prenatal vitamin, by the way. So this is actually another recommendation for couples, who are trying to conceive. Everyone should take a prenatal vitamin. Men can take a prenatal vitamin. There are some that are formulated just for them. They're packed with good stuff. Men can also just take a run-of-the-mill, high-quality multivitamin because most of the ingredients are there. CoQ10 is in a lot of these vitamins now. CoQ10 is a great ingredient. It is one that can have very positive effects. Can't fix anything. Again, reminder, can help boost your odds. But the great thing about CoQ10 is it's not going to have any side effects or interactions. It's a pretty innocuous substance in terms of how it plays with other things. And for women, the high quality prenatal, that should start in the months before you try to conceive, because if you have ever looked at a cereal box or pasta box, you'll see that everything's enriched with folic acid these days. And it's because folic acid is proven to reduce neural tube defects. So it's in all of these processed foods that we eat, cereals, pastas, etc. But it is also the primary ingredient in prenatal vitamins. And so I think that, again, there's a whole guide to choosing prenatal vitamins in Fertility Rules. I spent a lot of time looking into this and reading about it because I realized a lot of these fancy designer prenatals they don't have enough iron in them. They don't have any iron in them. If they're gummy vitamins can't even contain iron. So please stop taking gummy vitamins. Actually, if that's all anyone on this podcast remembers, great. I would be very happy if that was it.
Yes, do not take the gummies. I completely agree with that. And not to mention that they are in high fructose corn syrup is what the gummy is. So do not do that.
And they often don't even contain, I could really go down a rabbit hole on this topic, but oftentimes, even if they're marked with certain percentages, the labeling rules are such that you can be 20% above or below a certain quantity in a production run for supplements, and that's still considered compliant on labels. Wow. So if your vitamin says, it has 22% of your daily iron, value, it could have just 2%, and it would technically still be a compliant label. And also, you're never going to get iron in a gummy vitamin, but it's just a reminder, you're never going to get it. It's not going to happen. So just be judicious and just know expensive is not always better. Bona fides by doctors are paid ads. It's not, when they say, it's designed by a doctor, it doesn't really mean anything. You should really look into the sourcing practices, see if the amounts match, the recommendations for each, vitamin and mineral, and start there and just know expensive. Sometimes you're just paying for their marketing.
For sure, for sure. And there's a couple of supplement brands that I really like. And I agree with what you said. Always work with a practitioner and get a supplement program tailored to you. Don't just look on Instagram and be like, oh, it's the latest,
No.
it's the greatest, and take that. So
Yep.
I could definitely go down a rabbit hole here, but we have to move on. So, so talk to us. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Bumpin. We've talked a lot about fertility rules. Tell us about Bumpin. What can people learn from that one?
So Bumpin was written in real time while I was pregnant with my first son. And it was a fascinating journey for me because I was myself pregnant. I was interviewing OBs. I have a wonderful OB editor that has, been my writing buddy and editor for both of my books. Talking to her about issues she sees in clinical practice, seeing, what was going on with women at birth. And so, I also spent a lot of time on Facebook and Reddit forums and all of these kind of deep holes on the internet where people asked anonymous questions, the questions that they couldn't really ask anyone in their life, which is so often what happens online, especially Reddit. Reddit has some really incredible communities packed with people who are both very well informed and also just, there are just certain things you don't want to say to the people in your life. And so you say them on the internet. So I spent a lot of time trying to come up with, what are the questions I have, but more importantly, what are these universal set of questions that, people have during pregnancy? And also, how do we invite men in to become part of the process in a deeper way much, much earlier? And so my secret theory is that if we can get men to start caring about preconception, start caring about their bodies more before they ever conceive a child, they will then care more later on when they are watching their partner go through pregnancy. And when that child comes, they feel so much more invested because they've had to invest time and effort. Right now, frankly, like looking around here, I mean, women are the ones who are judged for it. We are the ones who breastfeed. We are the ones that put in all of this time. We are the ones who are pregnant. Men really need to step up. Men need to get more involved, and men want to be more involved. The number of men that I talk to who want to be incredible, involved fathers is much higher now than it was 5 years ago when that book originally came out. And so I think we need to do our best to tell men what they need, not expect them to be mind readers, and also invite them in, give them things to do. Let them own certain tasks. Let them own certain parts of childcare later. But it all starts when you are pregnant. And so that was a major unlock for me, is I just felt that I was having these conversations with parents later. And I said, what my question to them that I closed with always was, if you could go back in time and tell yourself something when you were pregnant or when you were trying to conceive, like what's the one thing that you wish you'd known back then? Whether it's don't kill yourself over breastfeeding at month 9 because, you've had mastitis 5 times and you just, you're at your wit's end and like maybe it's just time to stop. But for so many of them, the kind of relationship burden of small children is no joke. And I think that the sooner you start to communicate with your partner in a respectful way, even during pregnancy, it just pays dividends for the rest of your life.
For sure. For sure. I love that. And I could talk all day to you because it's just such a wonderful conversation. We do have to start to wrap up because I'm sure our audience is ready for that. But before we do, and before we hear where we can get your books and learn more about you, I want to play a little game just really fast if you're open to that.
Yeah. Fire away.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and it's going to let the audience just get to know you personally a little better. So just
Great.
say the first thing that comes to your mind when I say these words. All right.
Great.
You ready? Let's do it. Okay. Favorite food?
Sushi.
Least favorite food?
Red meat right now.
Favorite animal?
Tiger, because I just went to the zoo with my kids and they absolutely freaked out.
I love it. Least favorite animal?
Hippopotamus, because I was chased by one in Botswana one time on safari and it was terrifying.
Oh my gosh. That could be a whole story on the podcast. Favorite vacation spot?
Lake Tahoe.
And something or someone you love?
Oh, my boys.
Yeah.
My boys.
Amazing. I love it. Well, thank you for playing along. That game's always so fun and really lets the audience learn your personality. So I love that. Awesome. Well, Leslie, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Tell everybody where they can find you and learn more about getting your books.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called this week. You can find me on Instagram. You can email me. I have a website, leslieschrock.com. And my books you can buy at pretty much every bookstore. You can find them at the library, and Amazon Bookshop. I love supporting local booksellers. So ideally, if you've got a favorite bookstore, go in there and ask if they don't have it and buy it from them. It's such an important community to support.
I love that. It's amazing. Well, as we close, any final thoughts? What do you want to say to our audience? Maybe a piece of advice you want to leave.
I think the notion of kindness is really the thing that I'd like to see more of in this world. I think there's a lot of judgment among parents. I think that everyone feels so much stress and anxiety at different times during the journey to becoming a parent, later as a parent. And I just would encourage all of you to take a moment for yourself when you're in that space, to be kind to yourself, but also to cut your fellow parents a break. Don't assume the worst. It's one thing if it's safety, but if it's just a choice you wouldn't have made, just be kind to each other, because we're kind of the best advocates for each other that are out there. And, we're all doing the best we can. So just be kind.
I love that. It's amazing. And I completely agree. Well, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation.
Yes, for sure. And thank you, everybody who's listening to the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Hey, hang on a second before you go. I've got some fantastic free resources waiting for you over at our website. You can find that at www.hormonepuzzelesociety.com. You'll find everything from a fertility meal plan, a cycle optimizing quick start guide, even a pregnancy meal plan. Plus, there's masterclasses and blog posts from myself and leading experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition, all designed to support you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of unexplained infertility, but there just wasn't. That's why I put all of these resources together for you. So make sure you go and check these out and make the most of the support that I've arranged for you. And here's a little secret. These are the same strategies and foods that helped me conceive not once, but twice, even after my doctor said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. Make sure that you take advantage of that. And I can't wait for you to be our next success story. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember to visit our website at www.hormonepuzzlesociety.com for the show notes of today's episode. And if you've enjoyed our time together, please subscribe and leave us a review. I so appreciate you, and thank you for being a valued listener. See you on the next episode of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L E Podcast. Take care and lots of love.